Oh, sweet nothing. That sums up the take I have about T. Higgins to the 49ers. But we'll talk about those rumors down from Mobile, Alabama. Brad Graham is the guest joining us now on the UMA guest line. He runs the SF Niners on Twitter and YouTube, does a great job covering the 49ers coverage if you're ever in need of some more 49er talk. But Brad, appreciate you joining us bright and early out here on the West Coast. But you're out in Alabama from the Senior Bowl. How we doing this morning, man?
Marcus, Carey, appreciate you guys having me on, and it's been a lot of fun watching some football out here and watching these guys compete at a high level.
Yeah, and Brad, it always feels like this is what kind of kicks off our draft coverage because, of course, everybody focuses on the combine, but you're there, boots on the ground. I've seen footage of John Lynch out there chopping up with Adam Peters on the sideline, really getting that first scouting reports from all the seniors. So what have been your big first takeaways, and what do you think is the main area that John Lynch is scouting down in Alabama right now?
Well, it's funny, when you watch John Lynch kind of walk around the sidelines, he's been front row and center in the trenches. And I think when you ask 49er fans what they think needs to be adjusted and maybe improved on the 49ers roster, they're going to talk about offensive line. They're going to talk about defensive line. And so whenever you try to spot John Lynch on the sideline, he was right there front row and center for one-on-ones, O-line versus D-line. And one of the great things about it is John Lynch was having a blast. You could totally tell that is a football guy through and through. When they were doing one-on-ones, he looked like he was ready to put a helmet on and get in there. It was great, and you could really sense that there is a heavy focus on the trenches, and I think 49er fans would be happy to hear that.
Man, it's music to my ears knowing that they're focused on the trenches right now. Obviously got to get better there, Brad. And before we dive deeper into the X's and O's, I got to ask, I've always been fascinated by the Senior Bowl. It's been one of the places that I've never been able to get to before. Mobile's kind of a cool destination for draft folks, right? Like you're excited to go down to Mobile, Alabama every year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a small little town, and when Mobile welcomes the Senior Bowl, you have the entire NFL world kind of ascend onto this place. So it's really cool. You get to see everyone out there. Obviously, the 49ers top personnel members are out there. You have coaches out there. It was really cool to see John Lynch and Mike Tomlin chopping it up on the sidelines. But it really is a great environment, and it just really brings the football world together because, honestly, there's not a whole lot to do out here other than the Senior Bowl. So it keeps you really focused and on task, and it's been a great time out here.
Yeah, and Brad, it always feels like to me, growing up around the Senior Bowl, there was kind of these negative connotations about it. Like, oh, these guys are still in college. They didn't get drafted after their junior year. What are they still doing as seniors? But there's also the benefits of having that experience and drafting a guy at age 23 or 24 versus a guy that's coming straight out at age 21. So talk to us about some of the benefits and some of the access you have to some of these seniors.
Oh, I mean, I think you hit a great point, and I think we saw a bit of a shift in the 49ers draft strategy just this last season where they went after guys who have been in college for quite some time, and you saw the instant success that we saw from Dominic Pooney, who started every game for the 49ers. Renardo Green coming in and really solidifying himself as a future starting cornerback in the league, and Malik Mustafa, all these guys who have a ton of time on task in college, we saw that translate to the next level. And I think when you look at some of these seniors who have logged a lot of starts, you can really see how that preparation really translates to the field. They look comfortable, they look confident, and man, you really get to see these guys start to ascend. So there have been a bunch of players that have really stood out, and I think the 49ers are going to be licking their chops to potentially get their hands on them and fit that similar mold of that last draft class that they just had.
Yeah, Brad, I love your coverage of the team and the way how you go in-depth in each position group and kind of talk about these players as football players. I know that you've got that experience, and one of the things I wanted to ask you is obviously one of the things you're tracking down there in Mobile is who John Lynch is looking at and who other 49ers player personnel evaluators and scouts are looking at. But I wanted to ask you just independently, who's caught your eye down there? Which seniors, just outside of whether they're a fit for the 49ers or not, which players have stood out to you most?
One of my favorite things about the Senior Bowl is the ability to see the FCS guys go up against the big dogs, the Power 5, offense, defensive linemen, specialists, wide receivers, cornerbacks, all those spots. and be able to see that competition kind of at a baseline where it kind of levels the playing field. And when I look at some players who have really stood out that could potentially be a fit for the 49ers and sticking on to the trenches, I look at a guy, North Dakota State offensive lineman, Gray Zabel. He's about 6'6", 315 pounds, and he had a phenomenal Senior Bowl. He might be one of the guys that made the most money this week, and being able to see him go up against, these top defensive line prospects in this class and just absolutely hold his own, and not only hold his own, but dominate. And you could see the pad level, you could see the strength, the way he can lock out his arms, great base, great feet, good hips. And when you're looking at a guy who's likely going to be an interior offensive lineman at the next level, he checked all the boxes. And being an FCS guy, it was really, really cool to see. And then a local California kid who played at Sacramento State, Jackson Slater, I also thought made a lot of money. I look at him as a center at the next level, but one of my favorite matchups of the entire Senior Bowl week was him versus Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Walter Nolan, I think, is going to be a guy who's going to be in discussion for the 49ers at pick 11. And so I think Nolan really solidified himself as being a first-round prospect. So to see Sacramento State kid Jackson Slater go head up with a potential top 15 pick and hold his own, that's how you really be able to get a solid look at these guys and be like, all right, this Jackson Slater kid might have been an FCS guy, but, man, he really is proving that he can play at the next level. So there's a handful of those types of guys, and I really enjoyed getting eyes on, and I think that's the best part about the Senior Bowl.
Brad Graham, live from Alabama at the Senior Bowl on the Uma Guest Line this morning. And Brad,
next week.
Yeah, exactly. Getting ahead of ourselves. We got to ask you about that matchup also. But Brad, you mentioned Dominic Pooney's name. Without question, he was one of the standout and breakout players on this offensive line this year. But when you are looking at that offensive line as a unit, what do you think is the biggest area they need to improve if you had to power rank center, guard, or maybe even right tackle?
I think you have to power rank it, left guard 1A, center 1B, or they're interchangeable, because we're not sure if Aaron Banks is going to return. He might leave in free agency. And I think from what we saw on film last year, the 49ers probably need to get a little bit younger at center and can potentially improve that position. So I think those are the two spots right now that are ranked the highest. I know a lot of fans focus on right tackle, but for me, it's that interior spot. And if you can shore up those two positions, I think the red zone offense takes a big jump forward. I think the 49ers get back to running the football more effectively and efficiently. So for me, it's those two interior spots. And as you guys know, that offensive line is a team within the team. And so being able to get continuity at those two spots, I think would be huge for the 49ers offense next season. So those are really the two spots that I think need the most attention on the offensive line.
Brad, it's a time-honored tradition. Every offseason, we think the 49ers might be set at the running back position, and Kyle Shanahan might avoid picking a guy in the middle rounds, but we know that he just always does that. Last year was Isaac Guerendo. He's gone after some misses as well through the years. Ty Davis-Price, Trey Sermon. Anyone stand out to you at the Senior Bowl at the running back position? Because Christian McCaffrey's coming off this injury. It might be hard to trust Isaac Guerendo taking more than about 10, 15 snaps a game at that position. Anyone catch your eye at all there?
Yeah, actually, there have been, and it's funny that it's become a little bit of an inside joke amongst 49ers fans and people who cover the 49ers about the eventual third-round running back. But Marcus Yarns out of Delaware, he actually surprised me. No idea who he was heading into this week. And when you look at the contact balance, you look at his ability, just a fluid athlete. You know when you see those guys with the ball in their hands, and they just have a natural knack for being able to put their foot in the ground and go one direction or the other, get north-south in a hurry. So Marcus Yarns is actually a name that kind of stood out to me. Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, he's got the name value. His brother, obviously, playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He actually looked really solid throughout this week of practice. And this guy named Tuden out of Virginia Tech, phenomenal in one-on-one as a pass blocker. So you can pick your poison of potential maybe third round, fourth round running back prospects, but this is definitely such a stacked running back class. It's one of the better running back classes I think we've seen in the last couple of years. So with the 49ers, with Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo, we're kind of not quite sure what the future holds for J.P. Mason, as he's a restricted free agent. The 49ers could actually go back to the running back well, but this would be the class to do it. There's a lot of really good running backs here.
Brad Graham from the SF Niners is the voice here this morning on Uma Guest Line, and you are listening to KNBR AM and KNBR FM, San Francisco, the sports leader, Cumulus Media Station. And Brad, I find it pretty comical, the amount of superstars that the 49ers have on offense, but every time it seems like there's a big-name free agent, there's got to be some tie to the 49ers. And from what I'm hearing, there's some talk down in Alabama right now between T. Higgins potentially ending up with the 49ers. Now, Brad, I'll ask you a two-part question. Do they even need a wide receiver in this locker room? And do you think they should maybe gauge the value on a T. Higgins?
I mean, I think you always, gauge value, see if it makes sense, see if it's something that works out. And for me personally, T. Higgins is one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL. So I would love nothing more to get to cover him and watch him on the San Francisco 49ers. But when I look at the 49ers' needs, the contracts that they need to work out, and kind of the long-term sustainability plan for them, I don't know if paying another wide receiver $28 to $30 million per year makes the most sense for that. Now, if the cap is going to rise and Prague can work his magic and figure something out, of course, I'm open to it. But I just feel like there's a lot of other needs that need to be addressed first. I mean, there's holes. You need 2 interior defensive tackles. We don't know what the future of Drake Rema holds. You need another cornerback. You need another safety. You need offensive line. We talked about running back. And, yes, you would love to have a just plethora of weapons on the outside. But as it stands right now, we expect Ayuk to be back at one point this upcoming season. Jawan Jennings had a breakout year. John Lynch said Deebo Samuel's going to return next year. You drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round, and you had Jacob Cowing in the fourth. So they have some weapons, and I think you can supplement that room without necessarily having to spend top price in free agency, and that seems like that would make more sense from a long-term sustainability standpoint. But at the same time, if you're going to entice me with T. Higgins, and the 49ers can make it work, I'm not going to say no to it, but it just seems like it makes more sense to me to go in a different route than T. Higgins. But hey, you never know. The NFL is a crazy business, and some things happen that you never anticipate. So we'll see how it plays out.
Crazy business indeed. And Brad, one of the things you mentioned there in your answer was the 49ers need at least 2 more defensive tackles. Couldn't agree more with that. So let me ask you this. If you were general manager John Lynch, if you were making the call in the first round, do you go defensive tackle? Do you weigh best player available at that point, looking at pass rushers and offensive linemen? How would you approach the 49ers' first pick this year?
Well, I think if you ask the 49er fans, they want offensive line, and offensive line in the first round. But I don't know if there will be a guy who is worthy of being selected at 11 there. I think Will Campbell might fit that role, but I think he might be gone earlier. And so I think it makes more sense to push, and you can get some solid guard center prospects, second, third round, kind of like a Dominic Pooney. So I'm of the mindset you kind of replicate what you did last year because it fits where these prospects align. And this is one of the more stacked defensive line classes I have seen. I talked about Walter Nolan being a guy who could be a potential fit at 11 for the 49ers out of Ole Miss. I think they need to get either a 3-down, like lock as a 3-tech defensive lineman who can hold his ground in the run game, but also be a threat as a pass rusher. And I look at Walter Nolan as being a fit. He's more of a smaller defensive tackle, about 6'3", 300 pounds. And one of the things that I wanted to see him check off this week was how does he hold up in the run game? And he's got a knack for splitting double teams and being able to take those head on and really hold the line of scrimmage. So a guy like that makes a lot of sense. Mike Green has absolutely been the talk of the Senior Bowl with how he's been able to perform as an edge, really showing off that explosive ability. He's a player that I really liked early on in this process, and all he did, he made so much money in the first 2 days. He's like, I don't need to show up to practice on the third day. I'm going to opt out, make sure I don't get injured. I think I've done enough here. That's how well of a Senior Bowl he had. So there's multiple guys that even fit in this area. Shamar Stewart could be a guy that fits that role who's here at the Senior Bowl who really made a lot of money as well. So if you had to ask me, where am I going? I'm probably going defensive line, whether defensive tackle or edge. I feel like this class is too stacked, and you're going to be able to find a very quality player at that position at 11. So that's kind of where I'm looking, and I think you can still find starting caliber offensive linemen later on in the draft. So for me, I'm probably leaning defensive line there at 11.
Yeah, and I highly recommend anybody to go on Twitter and look up those Mike Green highlights of him just bulldozing offensive linemen. For anybody who has not seen him, I'm sure 49er fans would love to see him lining up on that defensive line, and I'm sure Robert Saleh would also enjoy that. And that leads me to one of our last questions about the DC return to San Francisco. We talk a lot about the difference between the X's and O's and the Jimmys and Joes. But, Brad, what are your thoughts on bringing Robert Saleh back and what he can maybe fix with his defense to maybe return to its Super Bowl form?
I think the number one thing that I'm really excited about is for Kyle Shanahan to kind of get out of that defensive room. It feels like over the last couple seasons with Steve Wilks and Nick Sorensen, he's kind of really had to be hands-on with the defense and really oversee what they're doing and provide input. And it just feels like with Robert Saleh coming back, there's an elite level of trust there. And I think with Kyle, he can just hand over the keys, say, Saleh, do what you got to do, make whatever personnel decisions you need to make in order to kind of retool this defense and get it back to a place where we need to be. I mean, Fred Warner credits Robert Saleh for, discovering him and being a guy who believed in him as a Mike linebacker. So, and we've seen some of the prospects that Saleh brought in, whether it was Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shaair. He understands what fits his defense the best. So what I'm really excited about is Kyle getting back to retooling the offense, getting that back on track, and being able to just pass off the baton to Robert Saleh to be able to rebuild the defense, and basically contribute to the reconstruction of it, but then also to be able to advance the scheme, be able to get more creative. That's one of the things that we've heard from some reports that were out there from the Shrine Bowls. They want to get more exotic. They want to get more creative, whereas the defense has been a little bit vanilla as of late. And I think that's what Robert Saleh can bring to the table. And when you looked at what he was doing with the New York Jets, you could see he's not the most exotic guy when it comes to blitz packages and things like that, but you could see through the metrics that started to take a trend up. And I think that if the 49ers can get back to that and get back to being creative and being able to put opposing offenses in the blender, I think that's what's most exciting about having Robert Saleh back as the DC.
Yeah, and we'll see if Robert Saleh can help this team get back to the Super Bowl. And Brad, that's our last question. Is the Super Bowl matchup? It seems like it's a 49ers' worst nightmare. Nobody knows who to root for between the Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs going for the three-peat. Brad, do you have any interest in Super Bowl 59?
Oh, boy. No, I don't, but I unfortunately will be covering it next week through Media Week, so I have to pretend like I'm interested in it. But in all seriousness, I think, 49er fans, I know it's a really tough decision for them, but it kind of feels like everyone's trending towards anyone but the Chiefs at this point, just based on recent history. I mean, we even saw Deebo Samuel on his podcast pick the Philadelphia Eagles, and we know his relationship with Eagles and Eagles fans. So I don't know, man. it's one that we didn't really want, but hey, we got it, and we love football, so we're going to end up watching it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brad. I'm not buying into the rumors of people boycotting the Super Bowl.
No.
At least we can tune in for the Kendrick Lamar halftime show. At least we can all enjoy that. But Brad, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you hopping on with us this morning. We'll get you back on when Murph's back from vacation, maybe around the draft, or maybe even around the Super Bowl, Brad. Really appreciate you hopping on this morning.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Cool. There he is.
Thank you.
Brad Graham from the sfniners.com does a great job covering the team.